No. Everybody, and we're back on our theme of stories behind the headlines. And of course, I feel that not having sort of seen or talking about some of the things, there are a few important things that we need to cover. And I came across somebody on the YouTube, which I had not sort of heard too seriously before, Professor Mahbubani, who is an excellent sort of analyst. He's a professor and, of course, an academician, and he's written a number of books on China and China's relationship with the USA. In fact, basically looking at the future and advising indirectly what China is doing right and, of course, what US is doing wrong. So we'll just do a little recap on that of what he's saying, so that it provides the context to what I'm going to be talking about as far as another aspect of China, which we haven't spoken before, and that is digital currency. We hear about bitcoins, we hear about all sorts of Ethereum or whatever other sort of coins that are there, but we haven't really heard about what China is doing on that front. So today I'm going to be covering that, so that we are also aware that apart from all the other things that China has got itself totally immersed in, it's again one of those areas that I think the whole world should sort of start taking seriously. Okay, what I'm going to be covering today is a little bit of recap on China, followed by what this digital currency is, and what China's digital currency is all about, and something called cryptos. It's just a sort of a technical term that is used, generally speaking, because we use crypto technology or cryptography for security, but there is a certain sort of, if you like, identity that has been used to define some of things like bitcoins, for instance, which is not a Chinese digital currency, but a global thing that has come about. And how this has helped the commerce, and we'll see in a bit detail how big a role that is playing in China. And of course, it also means that China is looking to see if they can make a global currency, a bit like the dollar. You know, the dollar which acts as a reserve currency for the world. And if you don't use the dollar, then of course you can't really do transactions unless you do, a bilateral type of exchange of each other's currencies. But dollar provides for them to have a common sort of medium to be able to transact global transactions. And it has helped the US very much to have a reserve currency, because it enables them to control large sort of areas of demand in the world through their currency. And there's a demand, and a demand certainly means, a strong currency, and that helps the USA. Okay, let's start talking about the recap, what I'm going to be talking about. Now, this is the guy, Professor Mahbubani. He's a diplomat. He was a diplomat for a good 30 years at the UN, representing Singapore. And of course, he's a professor as well now. And he was also president of the Security Council, which is made up of 10 countries, I think, for the early part of this millennium, 2001 and 2002, I think. So he's very much into the global sort of scenario in a big way. He knows what are the interests of countries and how they play their strong points and their weak points and so on, and essentially do what they can for their own countries. And what that means, of course, it's, there's no friends in the community as such. it's only common or national interests that work. So in that sense, he's got a lot of experience to be able to look at the whole um, international sort of order and to see, what has benefited and what has not. And here is the link that is a big interview of hour-long interview by one of the people who asks the right questions, and he comes up with good answers as well. So that's a very worthwhile education if you want to be able to have a more insight into what he's saying. And because I'm going to be sending you a recording later on, you'll have that at your, so you don't have to take it down. Okay, what he has done, Mahbubani, is to write about 8 books, I think, all on the relationship between China and USA, Asia, and the rest of the world, Singapore versus China, and so on, and ASEAN, and so on. So very, very sort of insightful type of books. And he is highlighting something which I think we're going to be thinking of in terms of really global sort of objectives. China's rise, he says, is because they have if you like, an objective. They have a goal. They have a plan to sort of do something in terms of helping the country. And what they mean by that is, of course, doing something for the people of China. Now, he says this is very important to be able to have that as a guiding principle, because without that principle, you're going to be diverted in one place or another. And to give an example of where USA, in fact, is failing on that front, is that he says, if you look at the 50% wages of the USA for the last 30 years, they haven't moved up. So in other words, although USA has done marvelous on the stock exchange and so on and so forth, yet the people have not really benefited. And that could explain also why Trump has come in and so on. So really, because USA, he says, is not a democracy as such, but a plutocracy, which means it's led by people who are in power, and they make regulation which suits them, and not really the common man. So you can see, for instance, in a clear case of their medical plans, for instance. 40 million people are still, are very, very poorly covered, 20 million not at all. And yet you have the richest people over there doing very well and having lots of money and top tax concession and so on. So he says that objective is not there in USA. So what is there in USA is really a desire to be big in terms of international influence and be the primate, if you like, of the global sort of scene. And to that extent, he says they have put up barriers and, of course, bases all over the world. So he says that is not a strategy, he says. It is really a tactical type of behavior. So for strategy, they must say, we are going to help the people of USA. Not a trickle-down sort of mechanism, but go out and about to help them, which China has done. And they have proved it by lifting the 800 million people out of poverty with all the programs that they have come up with. So that's a clear case. And then, of course, what they have done, this was elevation of poverty in China. And then what they have done internationally is this BRI. We've talked about it many times. And this BRI is, of course, the Belt and Road Initiative. And we are talking about it, in how much it has spread all over the world. And what they're planning to do, of course, is not only bring China to these countries, but also these countries to China. In other words, it's like the Internet of Goods, tying the world to China. And that, I think, is helping, if you like, the whole sort of community of nations all over the world. Of course, USA is not part of it, UK is not part of it, a lot of European countries are not part of it, but there are about 100 and I think it's over 65 countries that are part of it. Now, one of the examples that he has given is that they have spent something like $1.7 trillion in this effort, which means building roads and bridges and networks and ports and railways and whatever you think of, they have done it, and we've talked about it many times before. So they have spent, he says, something like 1.7 trillion on that. And then he gives the example of USA. He says USA has used the same money of 1.7 trillion to do what? And it's surprising what that is, and that is to develop F-35 fighter plane. I mean, you can see the difference that is there in resources that are being deployed. On one hand, you're talking about spending so much money, but of course it may have done good to develop some technology and so on. But the main thing was a fighter plane, and $1.7 trillion gone towards it, and something which is not going to be too helpful to it in the future anyway, compared to this 1.7 trillion that is going to be, if you like, part of what China is doing. So these two examples, I think, really highlight how the different perspectives are at work, and to use the rest of the resources to maintain the current status quo. He says it's not going to happen, because we've already seen that the China's rise in economics up front is quite exponential. It's rising by about 7 or 8% every year, whereas USA and Europe, 2 or 3%. If they manage that, I think it's good. Of course, the economies are much larger, so it's still means big bucks, as it were. But nevertheless, you can see the rate of change is quite tremendous. So that's just a couple of examples that I wanted to highlight for this talk as to where the thing has got to change. An example he has given, of course, is that USA is, with Trump's policy, has gone really against the principles of Western principles of basically free trade and so on and so forth, and democracies, but yet in practice it's not happening. So very enlightening type of talk, I would say. Listen to that. Okay, what we are going to be doing is now looking at this agenda in terms of, I think I've gone through this already, so let's skip that and go to this one here. What is digitalization? Now, we know that we already use a lot of the digitization in the financial world. By that, I mean it's basically converting our messaging between two ends using bits, technology, electronics, if you like. And that's one of the reasons why this 5G was so important, because we talked about 5G some time back, and 5G is quite widespread in China, and 5G is what? It is, after 4G, much faster and can carry a lot more data and has the potential of really increasing your, if you like, communication possibilities. Well, what happened to 5G, of course, we know is that Trump said, no, this is like a spy in the backyard, as it were. He's going to pick up all sorts of information and give it to the Chinese government. Now, of course, that's not very true. And even if it is somewhat true, it is not going to be something that doesn't happen here in the West also. Because we know these companies like Google and Facebook and all that, they pick up this data anyway. And we know that sooner or later, FBI has the authority through court that they can demand this data. So to accuse China of just, doing that, I think is a more a political type of slogan than really which is true. So in a way, what has happened is, as he says by sort of chiding China on this 5G and other areas, even the Uyghurs and all that, he says if you don't, if you don't sort of come to our system of democracy and checks and balances, we're going to shoot ourselves in our foot. So you can see the irony there. So anyhow, digitalization is something that enables us to communicate between 2 points using bits and so on. Now, what is different in terms of a currency? Now we use our cards, Visa cards and so on, we just stick it into a little device and it sort of sends information down through using bits there as well. But what is different in the current way of doing things is that we are actually sort of using the bits as just a communication device, whereas the idea of sending value is still the same. So the value of £10, £15, whatever it is still the same. And it can be, of course, hacked. And there are so many difficulties we've seen. If somebody takes your identity, all sorts of problems arise. Or if they take your PIN. So in a way, we are not using technology in its full sort of range of capabilities. So what the currency does, which I shall talk more about as we go along, is to enable a different way of perceiving what is the storage of value. Like for instance, notes used to be the case before, coins before that, checks and then credit cards. But now something more has come about, which is furthering, if you like, the facilitation of transmission and security is through these digital wallets containing your money, but in digital form, which means a string of numbers only. We'll talk more about that as we go along. So what is the advantage of this digital, electronic currency thing is that it has what I would call a point at which it differs from what are currently regarded as cryptocurrencies. A digital currency, in many ways, for transmission purposes and for enacting sort of transactions and so on, it's very similar, but and using the same technology, blockchains and cryptography and so on. But the big difference is that a central bank is responsible for its digital currency. Whereas if you take bitcoins and other things, other coins that are there, no central bank is responsible for it. It is just understood between people that there is a value that is there that can be used for transacting sort of, payments, so forth, so another. And you've seen that it's a very volatile market, and all the arguments are there about why it is good for some things but not for everything. So China has come out with a central bank digital currency. So money, it is really the normal money, except that it has a different identity, a string of numbers. So that is a way of dealing with the threat that central bank faced in terms of some of these big providers of services, like even Visa or whoever it is, or in the case of China, Alibaba and Tencent and those types of WeChat, who provided the service like a credit card, if you like, but in a digital form that could be used. And now what China is doing is, yes, you can use your platform, but use the currency that we are going to sort of say is our currency for which we back it. And it's not just going to be like Bitcoin, which nobody backs. So what this digital currency is going to be doing, it combines the power of blockchain, and it has also the management capability called distributed ledger technology. Uh, we'll talk more about this as we go along. So here, it basically, in short, it's a synchronized across multiple locations. Rather than having one central place, it is distributed ledger. Because as you know, one of the things that happens nowadays is that the bank keeps a ledger of our transactions. You know, what we spend, what we put in. And they are that's where the repository is. But in the case of this digital blockchain type of technology and distributed ledger technology, is that this information is distributed in all sorts of computers all over and maintained without having the possibility of somebody able to hack it, because it's very secure. We'll talk about it why later. Now, this is the blockchain, because you might have heard of this technology called blockchain. It is a type of record keeping, if you like, which has a timestamp on it along with your identity. You know, nowadays we have things called, you might have heard the expression private keys and public keys when you were trying to send some data across. Now, private key is something which is secret, which is your own, and that is your identity in a way. That, along with your transaction sort of ID, is then made into a record along with your timestamp and so on, and put it into a chain like that, which ties this record to the next one and to the following one as well. So it's very secure. You can't change it. So if somebody wants to come and change it, that becomes a follow-up blockchain. So you have a history, if you like, of how the transaction or how the record was kept, and that gives it that enormous type of security. Now, this is the distributed ledger I talked about. So if you've got some bills to be paid and so on, you can have that all sort of in different sort of machines here as a block here. Distributed in different computers as well. So there's no one central computer that keeps the record. Okay, what are the drivers for going this particular way of digital currency? Now, it's to integrate payment services, because we saw that these third parties were coming in, like, Alibaba and WeChat, and of course Visa and all the other people coming in between. They are just intermediaries. They don't actually sort of, but they have a lot of role to play in the way that we're currently set up. So it is a bit cumbersome. So this digital currency facilitates that, makes it a lot simpler to go through these third parties in so many ways. It's also an alternative data sources as a result, improved connectivity to the world. So we are going on electronics, so it helps on that front. Now, just a word about how big this whole thing is in terms of commerce. So e-commerce is electronic commerce. And of course, commerce has to do with so many transactions that individuals do, companies do, governments do, everybody does it, So these e-commerce growth has been the fastest in China. So you can see in the year, 5 years ago, saying this it was, about the same with the rest of the world. But then in 5-6 years, it just shot up to 44% of the commerce is there as far as China is concerned. Increase has taken place. Compared to this one here, UK is only 30%, and USA is even less, 14%, and in Germany even less than that. So you can see, compared to, and this is 2020 we're talking about, so you can see the amount of commerce that has been conducted in China is now practically half of what the total transactions are. Now, one reason we could say is that if you look at the setup of USA, for instance, it has, high purchasing power country, the GDP and all that's high, and per capita income is very high. And what really makes the difference for USA is these big shops like Walmart and so on. They have large distributing points all over the country. So anybody can go outside their homes and pick up one of these outlets and do the transaction. So these big, if you like, retail enterprises have contributed to making it easier for people to do the business and to go and buy purchases and payments and so on. Whereas in China, it wasn't the case. In China, because it's really coming up in the last 30 years, they don't have big companies like Walmart to be able to have a big distribution centers in China. So that meant that they had to have a platform which enabled them to transact the business from even the small outlets, whatever these outlets were, and not necessarily one belonging to a very huge one like Walmart, for instance. So this fragmented outlet scene in China enabled the common platform which Alibaba and WeChat provided be used extensively. Although the type of money that is being used, the earners are low sort of wage earners. Their incomes, I'll show you a graph again, which tells you a little bit more about that. Okay, so here's another sort of interesting thing there, which says that essentially 40% of the global e-commerce is owned by 4 Chinese companies. Now these are the ones in red. I'll just pull that out a bit. These ones are red. You can see this one is for 15, 14. I don't know the names here too well, but here they are. One is JD, because we have a shop here in Camden called JD anyway. So you can see they have 44% or whatever it is that was there, 44% is owned by these 4 companies. So enormous amount of e-commerce activity taking place. Now here is what I was telling you about this situation. This is a figure of 2017, and what I'm going to show is essentially how this graph is. This is the amount of per capita income. In USA, it's very high, $40,000-$50,000. And the penetration of that thing in terms of e-commerce is that much, about 10-15% here. And the rest of Europe is down here. But in China, although it has a low per capita income, yet the penetration in the market is huge. For the reason I mentioned earlier on. Because, even the little shops that are there in smaller cities, they will use a common platform. And that platform is given to you, with this type of facility that electronic currency gives. So here we are, some more figures about the preferred global commerce payment methods are the digital mobile wallet, 41%. Credit card has 24%, debit card 10%. By 2023, see the digital mobile will increase to 52%, and cards will decrease to 18 to 10% here. So you can see the decline of cards is going to be quite big in just a couple of years. So digital currency is come in a big way. Now I mentioned this Alipay and Wechat. They are the equivalent of our digital currency transactions that they are enabling everybody to do. So these are called super apps. They are not present. They are not present just in this. The West is also showing signs of movement in some way. So even here, USA and Europe, they are looking into it in a big way as to how to bring about these big super apps. These apps provide a variety of services: messaging, shopping, booking, ride sharing, and more, as in one site. So one app, you are able to do all this, rather than having an Uber or having a Visa or having a card for Sainsbury or Maxis or whatever it may be. So it's a one type of thing which facilitates the whole thing. So by 2020, China has become the largest consumer market worldwide. So already, China, if you look at this metric anyway, as far as payment system is way ahead of the rest of the world. And the company projects that it will occupy this position through 2022, followed by the US and UK. The US is going to have to catch up. And it is, far behind because it doesn't have the 5G technology as yet. They say they're going to have it soon, but they don't. And these are not important part of the e-commerce payments market landscape yet. So they're not there yet. Now, this is just a little picture of this super apps, Alipay and WeChat. You can just with your mobile go into any shop and make the payment in seconds. It's done. So, what are the drivers for change to reduce the dependency on traditional financial players, which in this case was Alipay and WeChat, and then capitalize on the existing functionalities, essentially also do what they are doing, accelerate the innovation to shift trust and governance. So, because Alipay and WeChat, they don't have the legal basis for accepting or refusing payment. It's only a government that has that legal right to sort of accept. So they are going to shift the trust away from things which are not. Like if you do a transaction on Bitcoins, you could lose your wallet, in minutes and that's gone. I'm not saying it's going to happen because it's quite secure, but that's what it means as far as conducting things which are not government backed. So this is what the digital currency by a central bank is going to bring in: a trusted infrastructure and its governance. Now, this is what we have over here is the current ePay system, electronic payment system. We use visas and so on and so forth. See these, and then we go from one the payer to the payee here. So quite a lot of transactions take place here. There's the instruments that are used, like these little machine, and the processing of that takes place, and the settlement takes place. So it's quite a complicated process once you make the payment. So that whole process becomes simpler with electronic currency. So this is basically saying it's government backed, and if it is coming from the central bank. Okay, so another sort of just to confirm, re-emphasize, digital currencies from central bank digital currency. Is a digital version of the current national fiat. Fiat currency is what we call pounds or dollars. But without intermediaries in the form of commercial banks, CDBCs are issued and secured by the central bank and make the banking system easier. So this is why there is such a big sort of payment. Okay, the local currency that they call it is DCEP, China's national digital currency. This is what and built with the type of technology that is very current. But it's issued by the State Bank, People's Bank of China. And the goal, of course, is to increase the circulation of the RMB is their local currency, MB, and make it possible for people to use that, and make it also international. The international version of RMB is called the yuan. So the two are very, very similar to each other, except one has the international sort of profile to it. And they want to move away from the dollar. And now there's a good chance that could happen. Why I say that is because this Belt and Road initiative that is taken place, that means there's going to be a lot of currency transactions between these countries. And if they have to go through this via medium of dollar each time, it means it's going to be expensive. And therefore what they're saying, okay, let's do the transaction in a way which is very simple. You hold some of our RMB and we'll hold some of your currency and we'll exchange it. So that is basically going to relieve the pressure on the dollar. I would say relieve the pressure of the dollar, but I would say will take away the importance of the dollar. And that is a big fear for USA, of course. Okay, this is again basically saying that digital money explain new forms. This is because of technology we are able to do this, and therefore no need to transfer physical money. Now, PayPal is one of those e-commerce type of entities, started by Elon Musk initially, by the way, until he sold it to eBay. I think he sold it. So this is again becoming important from the point of view of making it easier for people like us who want to make transactions using our credit cards and what have you, but make it easier in the sense that, like, I use this PayPal. It is using it. I have to simply say my credit card is this once, and that's it. Next time I use it, I just have to put a password for PayPal, and they automatically pay it, and they bill me or bill my card, and they take 1 or 2 cents as a transaction fee. But it's still not digital currency. So this you have to keep in mind. But digital currency is a different animal. And what we are doing with e-commerce here in the West is using fiat currency, but communicating on digitally from one point to another, but using the same methodology. So you see there is the. So what is a crypto wallet? Now, in having to use a digital currency, you have to have a wallet. A wallet is something that keeps the value of your currency, if you like, and it is just a string of numbers. But you say in brackets, 350 pounds or whatever. But what it essentially uses is a string of numbers to, in fact, transfer value from one point to another. Okay, what a crypto wallet does? Not only does a crypto wallet is a digital wallet, it keeps track of encryption keys used to digitally sign in transactions. It also stores the addresses on a blockchain where a particular asset resides. So when you make a transaction with this wallet, what happens is that the transaction, along with your public key and your address, which is again electronic ID, gets created in the distributed ledger as a block. And that block gets linked with a timestamp so that you can't sort of change that. If you want to change it, it becomes a second block. So you can see the authenticity of a transaction remains, completely secure. So, but then the dangers are this: if you lose the address and all that, then you lose, control over your whole ID and all that. So you need to be careful. Okay, this is just again saying we have over here a comparison. What is a fiat currency? What's a cryptocurrency? Cryptocurrency is, again, the generic name is the digital currency. Crypto is specifically used for those which are not done by the central bank. Crypto is like Bitcoin. It is publicly mined, and it has no central bank behind it. Whereas a digital currency will have the central bank behind it, in the case of China at least now. So here is just a few points saying that medium, this is a physical medium. Fiat is just, you have pounds and currency, dollars, pounds and coins and so on. This is just a digital numbers. This is bills and coins. Here we have the ID. If you have a digital wallet, you need to have a private and public sort of ID. Here is unlimited supply because it's fiat money. You see, the central bank at the moment, depending on the monetary and fiscal policies of the country, the government decides how much money to let it be in the market. This all depends on the monitoring of the state of the commerce and business that is taking place, and they print money. You see, there's no sort of control on that. Like for instance, in this pandemic, we saw the printing of money, or they spent billions and billions over the normals that they always kept saying that we don't have enough money, but now all of a sudden they had to, so they managed to print the money and give it for spending. This cryptocurrency, one feature of that like Bitcoin, is a limited supply. So you can't create more than what is, in the case of Bitcoins at least. I think the total figure is 21 million Bitcoins. So that, in 10 years' time, a Bitcoin might be worth $10 million. So in Bitcoins, there are two things that are happening. One is, apart from the value of transaction using digital sort of currencies, digital sort of identities and so on, but it also, the storage value of that Bitcoin keeps moving up and down. So if it moves up, it means that if you want to buy it with local currency, then you have to pay more to get the Bitcoin. Whereas if it goes down, then you have to pay less to get the Bitcoin, because you can convert, your money to Bitcoins and vice versa. Okay, sure. Another sort of thing there. Cryptocurrency was created with the intent to make central banks a bastion of redundant. So Bitcoin says, because we can do the transactions without a central bank, we can manage. But the banks don't like that. The governments don't like that. That's why the Bank of China and about 80% of the whole central banks of the world are also looking at to see if they can create their own digital currencies for the countries. We'll see a little bit of that in the diagram maybe. Okay, even the Bank of England is looking at that to see how they can sort of make it that digital currency. There might be a digital pound, for instance. Okay, so the digital currency has exactly the same functions and properties as paper money. So we gathered that much so far, except that its form is completely digital. Simply put, China's central bank digital currency is the digitized, Chinese currency, which is the yuan or the RMB. So how is this digital currency different from Bitcoin? China's CDB is different from other digital currencies such as Bitcoin. So the latter is not backed by the government. This is the important point, and has no legal tender basis. So it is just dependent on the trust that people put on that Bitcoin. CDC, on the other hand, is government-backed and with unlimited legal tender status. And there's no legal. So in fact, it is legal to transact business, whereas with Bitcoins, I think the government don't like it because they can't tax it, they can't detect who's doing what. So it's become really quite popular with the underworld for white drugs and whatnot. But apart from that, even legitimate transactions can be done without incurring any severe penalties of any sort, because at the end of the day, your tax returns have got to be filled by you. Okay, why China launches CBDC? Okay, why is that? So if you have a whole sort of market of currency, you need to be able to know where that market is headed. It helps governments to accurately manage and properly regulate the social wealth. This monetary policy and this, that, and the other, they get the data from various sort of sources, and then they act on this to bring in more money into the economy by lowering interest rates or increasing taxations, what have you, depending on which policy it is, whether it's monetary or fiscal. It improves financial management of enterprises, increasing their work efficiency, makes payment easier, safer, harder to fix. So digital currency has these advantages, can be more secure in terms of not only giving the data to the government as to what's happening, because with all these transactions being very digital, it's very easy to be able to capture information on transactions. I know there are privacy concerns and so on, but then privacy concerns are always there when you make a transaction anyway. But then the government has this information to look at it in a global sense and say, okay, these are transactions of this particular type of commodity and this particular service, and they can take a good sort of decision. So it's a very up-to-date way of monitoring what's happening. So in order to be able to transact that, you need a digital wallet, and nowadays you have an app on your phone, which you just keep it as an app and use it as a wallet. And what you do is, through this internet and so on, you can communicate and send, your currency value for purchases or what have you. But the thing is, it doesn't need internet. because you see, it is a currency that can be used even in the remote areas. So long as you have a phone and a wallet, you can use that in order to transact without the internet. And they're thinking about putting in like a little card, which will in fact be useful for exchanging the value through this in out remote areas. I don't know enough about it to be able to say how it actually works, but they say that it can work without the internet. This is where the whole thing is being tried out. If you like, this is China, and you can see it hasn't fully taken off in China as yet. In 2022, all of China will have the access and use of digital currency of China. At the moment, they're trying in these vast areas, which is several millions of people, and it's working apparently. So at the moment, this is basically saying at the moment we do similar transactions using credit card, but soon with the CDBC, you'll start using. This is a bit of a detail that is essentially saying if Alice wants to pay to Charlie and Bob, then these are the people. How does the transaction work? It's a little bit technical, but basically what it means is that you have two identities. One is your private key and your public key. When you create a transaction, you send the transaction across with your public key, and those who have your private key are only able to access it. So this is the way that it works. It's not necessary for us here to go into too much technicality. Sufficiently to say that it is secure because you have a private identity and a public version as well, and the two must come together along with the transaction, if you like, totals or whatever it is that it's made into as with the algorithms that they have, and these all three work in conjunction with each other to secure your transaction. So this is basically saying that you can now do yourself. This is using Bitcoin as the example, but the digital currency will also act in the same way. Okay, this is the area where they're trying this out. These are, East China on the eastern side is the most populated. So 80% of all commercial activity is over here. So if they're doing it here, so they're going to be doing a heck of a lot of stuff. This is a very remote area and not much activity here. But this is where the important thing is happening at the moment, the trial. By 2022, they say it's going to be everywhere. So basically saying you must have a phone which is charged and that will have a wallet of it for you to do that transaction. Okay, the wallets, again, a little bit of more explanation for the wallet. For the ordinary people who use this network, the people who do the buying and selling and the transferring, managing addresses and keys can be a bit of a hassle. But there are many different types of programs called wallets that keep track of these numbers for you. You can install a wallet on your computer or on your mobile phone or use one that sits on a website. So this is basically saying what are the capabilities of what. Okay, I'm just trying to see that this time is going on. So I'll continue with this later on because I think I just want to leave for at least 10 minutes for Q&A. So I'll stop here for the moment and we'll carry on. Okay. Okay, there you are. If you have any questions, unmute yourself. I know it was a bit rushed, but I'll be sending you anyway a copy. Yes, Pamela.
I think it's fantastic, very exciting. The only thing that worries me, you said if you lose your wallet, it's difficult. I didn't quite get that.
Yeah, you see, what it is that your wallet has all your digital information on it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there has been some cases of hacking where
Mm-hmm.
people can take your wallet. I know they are working on it so that it makes it quite impossible for people to do it, but you can. If you lose it, then you don't have a record of what is there. So I know backups and all that will be there, but for some reason, if your private and public keys are lost, then
Mm-hmm.
somebody else can use them. It's a bit like again using our PIN and so on. So, but with the digital thing, it's a much more difficult to hack, and that's why it's a bit more secure.
Mm-hmm. It would bother me if my phone was stolen or if I lost my phone or something.
If you lost your what?
Phone.
The phone. Yeah. Well, we'll just have to make it part of our body part, I suppose, sooner or later.
They have to have
That's
an
right.
implant
Yeah.
in the brain.
We'll have to wait for Mr. Musk to come up with that
Yeah.
technology for us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello,
Can I
Malala.
ask? Hi. I understand a little more than I did before. Thank you. But can I ask, so why is Bitcoin controlled? Why is it limited, right? I mean, it's a dangerous thing to do, but why exactly is it being limited?
Well, the guy who started, supposedly, we don't know who did it, somebody called Satoshi Takamoto. No, Takamoto. A Japanese guy. Apparently, they say he's got 1 million of them because when he first created it, he sort of, created that many. It's an algorithm that creates the bitcoins, and it is a pretty complicated one and requires a huge amount of processing to generate extra bitcoins. So it's a bit like mining gold. So what these people have done is they're starting to mine bitcoins by running these huge, pools of computers using enormous amounts of electricity to create bitcoins. Now, the function of that creation actually has to do with policing, if you like, in a way, the whole transactions that are there on the blockchain. You have to go through them, and if you are able to come up with some sort of figure that seems to be authenticating the fullness of the transaction that has been put on, then they get a little reward, and that little reward is the one that becomes a Bitcoin sooner or later. It's a bit complicated, but it is limited to 21 million. But that doesn't mean there's going to be only 21 million sort of Bitcoins in the world, because the smallest denomination, which is a 1 millionth of a Bitcoin, is called a Satoshi, named after the inventor. So those Satoshis would keep on increasing in value. So the total requirement of humongous numbers is going to be met in that way by the increased value that it gets. You can see the Bitcoin now has gone up to about $30,000-$40,000. When I was looking at it, it was about $100. We went up to $700. Then I said, I'm not going to go into it because I don't understand it fully. If somebody hacks into my computer, I'm going to lose my money. So I didn't go that much in there.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're all happy with China's role there. Yeah. Well, Pam.
Thank you for explaining it to us, because I knew nothing about it, and now I do know a bit about it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I did show one of the things there, but 80% of the world's central banks are looking at the possibility of having their own digital currencies. And Bank of England will also come through with that. The Fed also is talking about a digital dollar, but they've given the problem to MIT to try and come up with a good sort of way of doing it. Whereas China started the process in 2014, so they're already 6 years ahead. It's China. When we talk about China again, coming back to our old sort of thing, they are also ahead in 5G technology, and this, along with e-commerce and self-drive cars, Internet of Things have got to communicate with each other, it is going leaps and bounds ahead, in terms of what. But I would say, listen to the link that I have on the on the page in one of the slides, because it talks about the rather big ideas of where humanity is in terms of how to deal with each other in terms of countries, and whether USA will continue to being number one, and the signs are not. So it's interesting listening.
Do that.
Okay, hi George. I didn't see you earlier on.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I was a bit late joining. I was about 15 minutes late, but very good.
Oh, okay, well, glad that you made it.
Gardening. I was gardening all afternoon.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, just getting down to the earth,
Well, God bless. In my opinion, what I think is the very important thing is that a country needs to have a strategic goal. A goal, I think, and that goals are missing in a lot of countries' policies, because a lot of these policies are pandering to the popular sort of demands, and that's where democracy is failing in so many fronts. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have eventually a democracy everywhere, but it should be the type of democracy which enables not just the big powerful barons to control the country, but rather serve the people. This is the important thing. And that message, I think, is forgotten in a lot of countries. I'm happy to say that the World Environment Day was celebrated in Pakistan. And Imran Khan gave a very good speech, because his target now is to plant 10 billion trees in Pakistan to help the environment. And he goes through all the reasons how that benefits the country, which is very interesting listening. It's also an honor for Pakistan to be nominated as being the country to host, because it is showing a record of doing something substantive.
Just to say, I don't know whether you've heard, I mean, you're talking of Environment Day. I don't know whether you've heard of this tragedy in Sri Lanka, where this ship is breaking up, producing enormous amounts of variety of poisons and plastic.
Whose is that? Sorry, Malala?
There is a ship which is going from Qatar.
Whose ship is it?
Pardon?
Oh, whose ship?
It was going from, it's registered in Singapore, and it is going from Qatar to Singapore.
All right. So
and India refused to have anything to do with it. And it's carrying such a variety of poisons, acid, nitric acid, precursors for plastics, so that they'll be full of microplastics. And they still don't know what exactly it contains. So fish just getting washed up on shore. That coral reef will be destroyed. It will be years.
Yes,
but I actually don't see it. It's not really headline news. I think it's such a tragedy. Just imagine this sort of thing happening, allowed to happen, no control whatsoever.
Yeah.
They have no defenses. And I don't see anyone really going there to help. The Navy is trying to dredge up, I don't know what they're doing, trying to collect up the plastic.
Really quite depressing, that type of news.
So tragic.
Because, if all the pollutants get put into a small area like that, it's going to kill everything off in the neighborhood.
That's right, yeah.
It's also going to kill people's livelihoods, because a lot of them fish.
Yeah.
So people are going to be hungry, and the fishermen will lose all their jobs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially now that, the Colombo, had the financial sector which was reclaimed from the sea. I don't know whether
Yes,
you remember that we covered that when we did the
That's
China, BRI, and Sri Lanka,
Mm.
and that area of financial center was reclaimed from the sea at Smooth, and that is going to be affected, I'm sure, because all the beaches and
Yeah.
all the life things there.
We really need to bring in international laws to control the ocean and what happens.
Yes.
Because I was listening on the radio about the cruise ships, and apparently every day the sewerage is the equivalent of a large swimming pool, which goes into the sea every day on these cruise ships.
Right.
Yeah, the cruise ships are not only putting their waste in there, but also the fuel that they use is the worst.
Yeah.
That type of heavy oil, whatever they use, and that came out when we talked about that link that was being considered from linking LA to Shanghai through tunnel and train, and how that whole thing was going to disrupt the shipping and the freight industry enormously.
Right.
It would be a good thing if that came about. So let's hope some technology will come to the rescue again. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we'll hopefully meet next week.
Yep.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Brilliant. Bye now. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me, Pam, about the recording.
You're welcome.
I don't have to do it again.
No, it's my job.